Well, good morning. It is great to be with you all and to be with these folks. We have partners that we work with, particularly, not just on floodplain management over the years, but particularly given the work with Sandy. Always good to be back with Steve. And a great pleasure to actually see that the National Security Council has allowed someone outside of the castle to come interact with the rest of the people. I will tell you that as we have worked on elements related to reducing risk, we have made more progress on this topic over the last 4 years than I think any of us probably imagined when this administration came in. And so we look particularly at this flood standard element. Last year, when we were here, we talked about the fact that such a standard was under development, there was work being done on it. And there's been a number of pieces moving in that direction. Some of these were alluded to in terms of the Climate Action Plan and the work coming out of Sandy. These all pushed us down a point that says we need to elevate our game. And really this big surge that came from 2013 and 14. And we've seen just incredible leadership, particularly from the Council on Environmental Quality and the National Security Council. And this is the first time that at the NSC there has been an attention to the point that there is a director for hazard mitigation and risk reduction, something that we've never had to this point. And so we have been looking at this flood standard in such a way that really helps agencies elevate their game in ways that frankly meet the way that many of you already done. I know here in Fulton County down in Atlanta, you guys have a +3 standard in place in terms of new development. And so we have this executive order that came out. Eric spoke about it, but I want to pick up one of his threads and push it a little bit farther. This is an incredibly strong policy statement. 4 years ago, I don't know that people in this room would have viewed the work that we're doing as an imperative for this nation's security. And what the president has done is lay this out and says these issues of resilience are at a core of our national security. That these elements related to our economic vitality in communities, when we don't meet that element, this nation is not strong enough. And so these kind of elements that drive you down to this point, to make these kind of policy statements related to the resilience and particularly the attention to the federal assets. So the executive order comes out. It has been 124 days since the executive order was signed. We have covered a tremendous amount of territory since that point. We were directed by the president to go out and solicit so that we could then consider the input of governors, mayors, and other stakeholders. I had an interesting opportunity to travel all over the country and talk with many, many folks, including many of you that are in this room today, about where these pieces are at. I'll talk more about where that's at, but there may be a few of you who don't actually understand or haven't been exposed to the details of the standard. At its core, what the standard does, it says when you're making federal investments in construction and projects, there are 3 approaches that are set as common denominators that we can choose from to ensure that we build stronger and safer. One of them is to say we've got data related to the future risk, climate-informed data that says for that specific location, we have information going forward. Frankly, this is something that a number of agencies, including the Corps, have been doing for quite a number of years through your 3x3 planning process, where they look over the life of the project and says what do they see as that risk horizon, and that informs how they build. In other instances, those data are not available. And when that is the case, there are 2 other options for us. One of them says that we elevate 2 feet above the base flood elevation that is published. For critical actions, it would be 3. Another option is to look at the 500-year. And we've tried to lay these out in such a way that there is flexibility, so that we can look at the practical needs in a given area in terms of what is needed there to ensure it works. So you see this kind of piece. We issued these pieces. We put out a document that's about 64 pages long, said, take a look at this. Give us your feedback on it. And we got feedback. I'll talk more about that here in just a moment. We held 9 sessions across the country. More than 800 people participated in those sessions. At the request of many externals, they said they needed more time, so we extended that engagement period to a total of 90 days. And we are now in the throes of working those elements. There is at times confusion about where this applies. And let me be very clear, it is about that federal nexus. This is not intended to have a direct application to private investment. It does not change how the National Flood Insurance Program delineates the special flood hazard area. It does not change the levee regulations that FEMA has in place. It does not change the minimum standards that need to be adopted for communities that many of you help lead in terms of those local floodplain management ordinances. It doesn't change the price of insurance. It doesn't change how we deal with payouts afterwards. But what we did is we said we needed to go out and listen. And we had a set of things that we thought people would be focused on. And while those played out, let me tell you what we very clearly heard. We heard that people want us to put in writing the things that we said about its application or how it interacts with the National Flood Insurance Program. They want to see those words on the page. We heard people say, we're concerned about an expansive reading of this that may have an application on financial products, things like Federal Housing Administration loans. We heard quite a bit about permitting. We heard folks being concerned about how would this interact with 402 permits, 404B, 408, a whole series of the 400 series that Steve enjoys in his spare evenings as he reads through the stacks of these various permits. That is what you do at night, right? They send you home every night with a stack of them, exactly. And you just sign, something like that. We heard. And so, we've actually gone back through and parsed it. I'll give Eric a new number, 2,700 comments. By the time we parse those into each individual piece, there's 2,700 comments. Of those, 24 of the comments opposed the standard outright. I'll go back and says with 99%, we've got a lot of room to move. But here's what I can tell you. The commitment we made is to be transparent about it. All 2,700 of those comments are available for you to read this morning. When you get bored, you can go to regulations.gov. It makes for wonderfully long reading. We're going to summarize those and put those out. But the document that we put out in draft will change. It will change. We pushed out yesterday the first of a kind of paper that says, here's how we're handling the NFIP. That's intended to be clear, and that will get incorporated, the instrumental parts of that, into the implementing guidelines. And there are other questions that are in front of us, and we will put out in public, this is where these elements are headed. Because we have to ensure that this is having its desired effect. And that engagement that we had with the nearly 800 people that interacted with us and the 2,700 comments is shaping where we're going. And I think we're going to have a much better product as a result of that. But for me, from a FEMA perspective, it's more than just the flood standard. There are a set of priorities we have at FEMA. 3 of these have been with us since Administrator Fugate arrived 6 years ago. The attention to making sure that we are survivor-centric, which is to say we are meeting the needs of communities, that we are expeditionary in ways that we are present on the ground, yes, during a disaster, but also in terms of how we engage and collaborate. I think you see that the way we do some of the risk map engagements and some of the ways that our floodplain management work plays out. An attention to the catastrophic. On the worst day in this nation, is FEMA prepared to come and stand and move us forward? But Administrator Fugate added this 4th priority, that we would enable disaster risk reduction nationally. Things like the flood standard are included in that. But I will tell you this is the biggest attention that FEMA has given to risk reduction in the nation since the days of Project Impact. It joins those top 3 elements at the core of what FEMA is supposed to be doing as we work with communities. There are 3 elements here that are in play related to that 4th priority. Some of that looks like things that we've been doing in other directions we need to go. I'll let you go online and read that portion of the strategic plan. But we understand that folks have to have credible, actionable data in order to support decision making. Risk map is part of this, but it's looking broader. It's looking at these kind of elements to ensure that we are driving the right kinds of action through the elements of our data. We understand that we need to incentivize and facilitate the kind of investments that change things related to both the current built environment, but I have a particular attention in terms of what is not yet built. The flood standard is actually called for in this part of the strategic plan. Clearly, FEMA needs to adapt some of our programs, those that you work across, the public assistance as well as the hazard mitigation space. We've got a lot of work to do to bring that together in a far more harmonized way. And really for the first time, you're going to see that the National Flood Insurance Program and how we enhance it and prepare ourselves for the reauthorization is one of the administrator's priorities in terms of where we go. But I look holistically at this because in order to deliver this, we have to understand that the risk reduction in this nation needs to be broader. And while I'm not quite ready to make an announcement on this, what I'll tell you, I think part of the answer is that for the first time in 20 years, we must update the Unified National Program. We have to look at this as being more than just insurance, but we've got to look at this broader pace across all of the agencies. Yes, the Corps of Engineers in FEMA, but also NOAA, the Small Business Administration. We have to look with HUD and transportation. We have to look across that element and understand that insurance is but one piece of that puzzle as we seek to manage flood risk in our nation. If there wasn't someone in front of me showing me a timer, I would say more about the National Flood Insurance Program, particularly in light of the broader responsibilities I have. Instead, I'm going to invite you to come back at 5:15 tonight where you can ask everything you want about mitigation and insurance. There is a way to submit questions here, and I would commend you to do so, and I look forward to that longer conversation where the yellow numbers aren't appearing in front of me as they are right now. But I want to leave you with this. There's a Dickens quote that says, "There's nothing so strong or safe in an emergency of life as a simple truth." And in this room, we do have a simple truth, that the only thing that reduces risk is mitigation. And we have an important role at FEMA in terms as a catalyst and a leader in that space, but it is local communities who actually reduce risk, not us. It is the floodplain managers who walk into the mayor and the council members' offices, that walk in and speak with the board of supervisors, that deal with the developer who walks in and the homeowner who has questions. You are the folks who ultimately can realize that simple truth. And our role is to set a foundation and ensure that our programs help facilitate us to that end. Whether it's through setting standards related to federal investment, whether it's the kind of data that we put out, whether it's the ways that we advance things through the elements of floodplain ordinances. Ultimately, we're here to serve you. So with that, I simply say thank you. And we have a high bar that we have to meet to continue to serve you so that the risk in this country can truly be reduced. Thanks.